the music didn't fade. It died. One moment the royal ballroom shimmered beneath chandeliers carved before most kingdoms even existed, laughter echoing between marble pillars and crystal glasses raised in careless celebration. And the next? Silence. Because she had arrived. Aria Vale. The woman no one expected to see again. The woman everyone believed had already been destroyed. Whispers followed her before her feet even touched the marble floor. She actually came. After what she did? Every word curled through the air like smoke, slow and poisonous. 6 months ago, she had been a bride. A noble woman. A future duchess. Now, she was entertainment. Her simple dress looked painfully small among silk gowns and jeweled crowns. Eyes followed her like hunters watching wounded prey as she descended the staircase, each step heavier than the last. She hadn't come for forgiveness. She hadn't come to be seen. Only to deliver documents. Only to leave quietly. But humiliation has a scent. And cruelty always recognizes weakness. Then, he laughed. Lord Heron. The man who had shattered her life with a single announcement. Her former fiancé stepped forward, smiling like cruelty itself belonged to him. Ladies and gentlemen, he called, raising his glass as the room turned toward him eagerly. Allow me to reintroduce the greatest mistake this kingdom ever trusted. Laughter erupted. Sharp. Loud. Unstoppable. No one stopped it. No one ever did. Her fingers tightened around the papers in her hand as heat burned behind her eyes. She turned to leave. Escape before the shame swallowed her whole. But she collided with something that did not move. Documents slipped from her grasp, scattering across polished marble. The air changed first. Conversation died. Glasses lowered. Chairs scraped softly backward. And suddenly, everyone was kneeling. Everyone. Except her. Slowly, she looked up. Dark fabric. Broad shoulders. A presence so heavy it felt like gravity itself had shifted. The Alpha King. Warm fingers closed around her wrist. Not gently. Not cruelly. Certain. You ran far, he murmured. Her breath caught. I don't know you, she whispered. The king smiled. Dangerously. Oh, he said softly. I know you. Gasps rippled across the court as he pulled her beside him like the decision had already been made long before this moment existed. Across the ballroom, Lord Heron stared from the shadows, jealousy and disbelief twisting across his face as if the world itself had betrayed him. And in a voice meant for every noble, every whisperer, every enemy, the king spoke. This woman belongs to me. None of them understood then how dangerous that decision would become. Especially him.
The music stopped first. Not slowly. Not gracefully. It died. 1 second the grand hall shimmered with laughter and crystal glasses clinking beneath chandeliers older than most dynasties, and the next, silence fell like a blade across the room. Every head turned toward the staircase. Aria Vale wished they hadn't. She stood at the top step, fingers tightening around the thin railing as whispers crawled through the crowd below like smoke finding oxygen. Too late to leave. Too late to pretend she hadn't heard her name. That's her. She actually came? After what happened? The words reached her in fragments. They always did. Half-hidden cruelty disguised as curiosity. Her heels felt suddenly too loud against marble as she forced herself downward. 1 step. Then another. She had promised herself this would be quick. Deliver the documents. Avoid eye contact. Leave before anyone remembered who she used to be. Before they remembered who she had been engaged to. Across the ballroom, banners bearing the royal crest hung in heavy folds of gold and black. Nobles clustered together like predators scenting weakness. Power lived here. Old power. The kind that crushed quietly and smiled while doing it. Aria hated everything about it. She had escaped once. Tonight was only supposed to be an errand. Nothing more. Halfway down the stairs, a voice cut through the murmuring crowd. Cold. Amused. And she thought she could walk back in unnoticed. Laughter followed. Lord Heron. Of course. He stepped forward from a circle of elegantly dressed guests, glass raised loosely in his hand. Handsome in the polished way wealth allowed men to be, cruel in the way arrogance sharpened features. Her former fiancé. The man who had ended their engagement publicly 6 months ago. Aria stopped moving. Her lungs tightened as memory slammed into her, the headlines, the accusations, the way doors closed afterward. The way everyone believed him. You look, Heron tilted his head, eyes dragging slowly over her simple dress. Surprisingly brave. The crowd leaned closer. Waiting. Always waiting for spectacle. I'm not here for you, Aria said quietly. Her voice didn't shake. That alone felt like victory. He smiled wider. Oh, but you are. He turned toward the guests, spreading his arms theatrically. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced, voice carrying easily across the marble hall. Allow me to reintroduce the woman who nearly destroyed one of the oldest houses in this kingdom. Gasps fluttered. Someone laughed. Humiliation burned hot beneath her skin, but she refused to lower her gaze. Not again. I came to deliver legal documents, she said. Move. She stepped forward. He blocked her path. Of course he did. You always were ambitious, Heron murmured softly enough only she could hear. Still chasing doors you don't belong behind. The orchestra members shifted nervously at the edge of the room. No one intervened. No one ever did. Aria reached to move past him and collided with someone else. Solid. Unmoving. The air changed instantly. It wasn't imagination. Sound dulled. Conversations faltered. Even Heron's smug expression flickered with something dangerously close to uncertainty. She stepped back automatically. Slowly, she looked up. Black coat. Broad shoulders. A presence that didn't ask for attention yet somehow owned every inch of space around it. The man standing before her said nothing. Dark eyes studied her face with unsettling intensity. Recognition lived there. Not curiosity. Not interest. Recognition. Her stomach tightened. I'm sorry, she began, assuming she had interrupted someone important. He didn't answer. Didn't blink. Behind her, whispers rose again, louder now. Is that? He returned today? The king. Aria frowned slightly. King? She turned halfway, confused. And that was when Heron's arrogance vanished completely. He bowed. Deeply. The entire ballroom followed. Glassware clattered as nobles rushed to lower themselves in respect. Aria stood frozen, the only one still upright. Slowly, the stranger reached out. His fingers closed around her wrist. Warm. Unyielding. A shock ran through her at the contact. You should kneel, someone hissed behind her. But the man holding her didn't allow it. Instead, he drew her closer. Close enough that she could feel the steady calm of his breathing. Close enough that the entire court watched. His voice, when it came, was low enough for only her to hear. You ran far, he murmured. Confusion hit first. I don't know you. A faint smile touched his mouth. Dangerous. Certain. Oh, he said softly. I know you. Then he turned toward the stunned crowd, his grip tightening just enough to make escape impossible. And in a voice meant for everyone in the room, the king spoke. Since introductions seem necessary, he said calmly, pulling her against his side. This woman belongs to me. Or quarter without sunlight. The towers stole it. They always had. From the narrow window above her bed, Aria Vale could see only a slice of pale grey sky trapped between walls of stone and steel that rose like judgment around the poorer districts of Aurelian. Above them, far above, the upper terraces glittered where nobles lived behind gardens and glass balconies designed to catch every ounce of warmth the sun offered. Down here, warmth arrived late. Sometimes not at all. A cart rattled past outside her building, wheels striking broken cobblestones. Someone argued in the alley. A baby cried through thin walls. Life beginning again. Aria lay still for a moment longer, staring at the cracked ceiling. Her wrist still felt warm. She hated that. The memory from the palace refused to fade, the weight of his hand closing around her skin, the way the entire ballroom had bowed while she stood frozen in ignorance. The king. She exhaled slowly. No. She refused to think about it. Last night had been humiliation layered on top of confusion layered on top of a mistake she should never have made. She had gone back to the world she escaped. And the world had noticed. A sharp knock rattled her door. Rent, came a voice immediately after. Of course. Reality never allowed long reflection. Aria sat up quickly, wincing as cold air brushed her skin. Her room barely deserved the name, a narrow bed pushed against stone, a small table stacked with legal files, and a kettle balanced precariously over a rusted burner. Once, she had lived in rooms larger than this entire building floor. Once, servants had opened doors for her. Once, she had believed promises. She shoved the memory away and crossed the room. I paid 2 days ago, she called. The landlord's voice answered through wood already splintering at the edges. You paid half. Silence. He wasn't wrong. She opened the door anyway. The man leaned heavily against the frame, eyes already scanning past her shoulder as though searching for valuables he might confiscate. There was damage downstairs, he added casually. Everyone contributes. Everyone meant the people least able to argue. Aria reached into her pocket slowly. Coins. Too few. Always too few. She handed them over without comment. He counted them twice. His mouth twisted. Late again next week, he warned. Then he left. The corridor smelled of damp wool and boiled cabbage long after his footsteps faded. She closed the door gently. Not because she cared about quiet. Because slamming doors reminded her too much of another hallway. Another life. 6 months earlier, reporters had crowded outside a marble estate waiting for scandal to become spectacle. She remembered the flashes first. Then the shouting. Questions thrown like stones. Did you falsify the contracts? Were you stealing from House Heron? Did you trap him into the engagement? She had tried to speak. Tried to explain. But Lord Heron had already spoken inside. And people believed powerful men long before they listened to women without titles. Especially women who suddenly lost theirs. The engagement dissolved within hours. Her reputation followed shortly after. The investigation found nothing. No crime. No fraud. No apology either. By then, the damage had done its work. Doors closed quietly. Employment offers vanished. Friends discovered urgent reasons not to return letters. Aria blinked hard, forcing herself back into the present. Memory was expensive. It stole energy she needed simply to survive. She dressed quickly, simple gray skirt, fitted jacket patched carefully at the elbow. Every stitch repaired by her own hands. Precision mattered. Appearance mattered. Even here. Especially here. Because the only thing she had left untouched by scandal was her work. Legal transcription. Contract review. Quiet jobs sent anonymously through intermediaries who never asked questions. People trusted competence even when they distrusted history. Most days. She gathered her satchel and stepped outside. The lower quarter breathed differently from the rest of the capital. Markets spilled into streets before sunrise. Vendors argued loudly enough to scare away hesitation. Children darted between carts carrying bread too stale for the upper districts but still precious here. No one bowed. No one pretended gentleness existed where survival demanded otherwise. She preferred it. At least honesty lived among hardship. As she crossed the square, two women paused mid-conversation. Their voices lowered. Eyes followed her. It happened often enough now that she barely reacted. Some recognized her from gossip sheets. Some simply sensed difference. Because despite everything she had lost, refinement lingered in posture, in speech, in the way she avoided stepping through puddles even when shoes leaked. You cannot unlearn upbringing. A carriage thundered past. Not the battered transport common to merchants. Polished black. Royal crest etched faintly into the door. It slowed. For a moment. Just enough for the curtains inside to shift. Aria frowned instinctively. Then it continued toward the upper roads. Coincidence? Probably. Still, a chill brushed her spine. She reached the law office shortly after. Calling it an office required imagination. 3 floors leaned together like conspirators, paint peeling from wooden shutters. Inside, the air smelled permanently of ink and dust. Master Elric barely glanced up when she entered. "You're late." "It's 7 exactly." He checked the clock. Grunted. Which counted as apology. Stacks of documents waited already. Trade disputes. Land claims. Inheritance arguments between siblings who hated each other more than poverty. Work she could lose herself inside. And she did. Hours passed unnoticed. Ink stained her fingertips. Language steadied her breathing. Until the door opened again. Conversation in the room died instantly. Heavy boots crossed the floor. Not unusual. Except clients rarely visited this district personally. Especially not dressed like that. Aria didn't look up immediately. Professional habit. Finish the line. Blot the ink. Only then did she raise her head. 2 men stood near the entrance. Both wore dark coats trimmed in silver thread. Not decorative. Official. City guard. Every clerk suddenly discovered fascination with paperwork. Master Elric rose quickly. "Gentlemen," he said carefully. "We require a transcriptionist." The taller guard spoke without preamble. His gaze moved across the room. Stopped on her. Aria's stomach tightened. "Her," he said. Elric hesitated. "She handles delicate contracts," he began. "She will come," the guard repeated calmly. Not a request. The office fell silent again. Aria stood slowly. Professional instinct demanded compliance. Survival instinct screamed caution. "What is required?" she asked. The second guard stepped closer. Close enough that she noticed something strange. He inhaled. Subtle. Almost unconscious. His expression flickered. Confusion. Then something sharper. Recognition? No. Impossible. He stepped back quickly as though correcting himself. "A document," he said stiffly. "Royal authorization." Every sound in the room seemed suddenly louder. "Royal." Her pulse stumbled once. Last night flashed behind her eyes, bowed nobles, cold dark eyes watching only her. Coincidence? It had to be. She gathered her things anyway. Outside, the carriage waiting for them bore no crest. Anonymous. Carefully so. As she climbed inside, pedestrians paused. Watching. Again. Even the guards avoided meeting her eyes during the ride. One shifted uncomfortably halfway through the journey. The faintest wrinkle formed between his brows. Almost as though something about her unsettled him. She noticed another thing too. The scent of iron and cedar filled the carriage. Familiar. Disturbingly familiar. Her wrist tingled. Memory whispered. She ignored it. The carriage climbed steadily toward higher streets. Past merchant terraces. Past government courts. Toward districts she had sworn never to enter again. Her fingers tightened around her satchel. "Where are we going?" she asked finally. Neither man answered. Outside, gates opened without challenge. Guards saluted. Servants bowed. Recognition spread through her slowly. Cold realization. They weren't taking her to a courthouse. They weren't taking her to a ministry. The carriage stopped. The door opened. Sunlight poured inside. Blinding after shadow. A servant stood waiting. Head lowered. "Miss Vale," he said respectfully. Her breath caught. He knew her name. "We have been instructed to deliver this personally." He extended a sealed envelope. Black wax. Gold imprint pressed deeply into its surface. A crown. Her pulse roared suddenly in her ears. She didn't want to touch it. Every instinct warned her. Still, refusing royal correspondence carried consequences she could not afford. Her fingers broke the seal. Inside waited a single sheet. Elegant handwriting. Precise. Unmistakably deliberate. She read it once. Then again. The world tilted slightly beneath her feet. A summons. Not to court. Not to trial. To dinner. Tonight. Signed only with a single name. A name powerful enough to silence entire kingdoms. Her wrist burned again as memory returned in full, dark eyes lowering toward her in a silent ballroom. "You ran far." Aria swallowed hard. Because beneath the invitation, written almost as an afterthought, was one final line. "Attendance is not optional." The palace looked different at night. Not softer. Worse. During daylight, Aurelian's royal citadel dazzled visitors with carved arches and gardens engineered to imitate paradise. Sunlight softened its severity, disguised centuries of conquest beneath gold banners and blooming terraces. At night, there was no disguise. Torches burned along the outer walls like watchful eyes. Stone towers rose against the sky, black and unyielding, their windows glowing faintly as though the structure itself never truly slept. Aria Vale stood at the base of the grand staircase and wondered, not for the first time that evening, if refusing the summons would have been easier than surviving it. The carriage had arrived precisely at sunset. No explanation. No escort willing to answer questions. Only the same quiet efficiency reserved for orders no one dared question. Attendance is not optional. The words had followed her all afternoon. She smoothed her gloves nervously. The dress she wore was borrowed. Simple ivory silk sent earlier that evening without note or signature, delivered by servants who bowed too deeply for comfort. It fit perfectly. That unsettled her most. Someone had known her measurements. Someone had prepared for her arrival long before she opened that letter. The massive doors opened before she could knock. Warm light spilled outward. Music drifted faintly beyond. A servant inclined his head. "Miss Vale." Again. No hesitation. No uncertainty. He knew exactly who she was. She stepped inside. And immediately understood this was not dinner. It was strategy disguised as elegance. Nobles filled the long hall in clusters of influence rather than friendship. Conversations paused as she entered, resumed seconds later in quieter tones. Recognition rippled outward. Some faces curious. Others openly hostile. A few afraid. Her stomach tightened. Why? She had no title. No protection. No reason to matter here. Yet space opened instinctively as she walked forward. Not out of courtesy. Out of caution. At the far end of the chamber, a table stretched beneath hanging lanterns shaped like falling stars. Crystal reflected candlelight across polished silver. And at its center? He sat. King Kalian. No crown rested on his head. He didn't need one. Power gathered around him the way storms gathered around mountains, inevitable, dangerous, unquestionable. He spoke quietly to an advisor when she entered. Stopped mid-sentence. Lifted his gaze. Found her instantly. The room vanished. Aria felt it physically. Like stepping into deep water. Recognition flashed across his face again. Not surprise. Expectation fulfilled. He had known she would come. Of course he had. A servant appeared beside her. This way. Every instinct screamed retreat. Instead, she followed. Because refusal inside these walls carried consequences she could not predict. Chairs scraped lightly as nobles rose when she approached the king's table. Not for her. For him. Kalian stood. The motion alone silenced conversation across the hall. He was taller than she remembered. Or perhaps proximity made him seem larger. Dark hair fell loosely at his collar. His coat bore no excessive decoration, only clean lines and subtle embroidery marking rank older than most nations. His eyes never left her. Miss Vale, he said. Her name sounded different when spoken by him. Lower. Almost thoughtful. She bowed carefully. Not too deeply. She remembered etiquette even if she wished she didn't. Your Majesty. His mouth curved faintly. Amusement? Approval? Impossible to tell. You arrived quickly, he said. Attendance is not optional. She resisted the urge to repeat the phrase aloud. I understood refusal might be inconvenient. Soft laughter murmured around the table. Dangerous laughter. He gestured toward the empty chair beside him. Sit. Not an invitation. An assumption. Aria hesitated deliberately. Every noble watching noticed. Good. Let them. I prefer to understand why I'm here before participating, she said calmly. Several guests stiffened. Someone inhaled sharply. No one spoke to the king that way. Kalian leaned back slightly. Studying her. Testing. The silence stretched long enough to become uncomfortable. Then. He smiled. Direct, he murmured. To answer your question, dinner. That explains nothing. Another ripple of shock. She ignored it. Fear had ruined her once already. She refused to let it rule again. His gaze sharpened. Interest replacing amusement. Yes, he said softly. I suspected you might say that. He stepped closer. Too close. Her pulse betrayed her instantly. The scent reached her again. Cedar. Iron. Warmth beneath restraint. Her body reacted before logic intervened, breath catching slightly, awareness sharpening. He noticed. Of course he noticed. I invited you, he continued quietly, because conversations conducted in ballrooms tend to attract interruptions. His eyes flicked briefly toward the watching nobles. Meaningful. Possessive. Protective? No. Impossible. You claimed me publicly last night, she said under her breath. And now you expect polite conversation? The temperature around them seemed to drop. Guests pretended not to listen. Failed entirely. Kalian's voice lowered. So you remember. I remember humiliation. His expression changed. Not anger. Something darker. Regret? It vanished quickly. Sit, he repeated. This time she did. because curiosity outweighed pride. Servants appeared immediately. Wine poured. Courses served with mechanical precision. Conversation resumed cautiously around them. Yet she noticed something strange almost immediately. No one addressed her directly. Not at first. They addressed him. Always him. But questions drifted subtly toward her presence. "She works in the lower quarter now, does she not?" one duchess asked sweetly. Aria recognized the tone. Predatory kindness. "I do," she answered before Kalian could respond. "How industrious." Polite laughter followed. Another woman leaned forward. Lady Seraphine. Beautiful in the deliberate way nobles perfected beauty, silver hair braided intricately, emerald silk clinging elegantly to calculated curves. Her smile never reached her eyes. "Your Majesty has always shown interest in unusual acquisitions," she said lightly. The word landed deliberately. Acquisition. Aria understood immediately. Object. Possession. Replacement. Seraphine's gaze lingered on her dress. On her gloves. On everything that revealed she did not belong here anymore. "How fortunate," she continued, "that generosity extends even to former scandals." The insult slid beneath courtesy. Sharp enough to draw blood. Aria opened her mouth. And Kalian set his glass down. Quietly. The sound cut through conversation like thunder. Every voice stopped. His gaze settled on Seraphine. Calm. Terrifyingly calm. "You mistake generosity for tolerance," he said. No raised voice. No anger. Yet the woman paled visibly. "I meant no offense," she said quickly. "I know," he replied. Which somehow sounded worse. The tension broke slowly afterward. Conversation resumed. But something had shifted. Aria realized then. He had defended her. Publicly. Without hesitation. Why? She barely finished her meal. Awareness burned along her skin. Because every few minutes, she caught him watching her. Not casually. Not politely. Studying. Measuring. As though searching for answers she didn't know she carried. Finally, she leaned closer. "Am I entertainment tonight?" she whispered. His attention shifted immediately. Closer still. Their shoulders brushed. Electricity shot through her unexpectedly. "No," he said. His voice softened. "You are the only honest person in this room." Her breath faltered. Dangerous words. Dangerous proximity. She stood abruptly. "I should leave." His hand caught hers. Not forcefully. Inevitably. Gasps whispered around the table. He rose with her. Close enough that the world narrowed again. Music swelled somewhere distant. Servants pretended blindness. "Walk with me," he said. "That sounds like another order. A request." She hesitated. Then nodded once. They moved toward the terrace doors together. Cool air greeted them outside. Moonlight washed marble silver. The city stretched below like scattered constellations. For a moment neither spoke. Freedom lived briefly in silence. Then. "You hate this place," he observed. "Yes." Honesty again. His mouth curved faintly. "You always did." Her head snapped toward him. "What does that mean?" He stepped closer. Close enough she felt warmth through layers of fabric. "You tell me," he murmured. Her back met the stone railing. Trapped. Not violently. But undeniably. "Your Majesty." Kalian. "I don't use first names with men who ruin my life without explanation." Something flickered in his eyes. Pain. Gone instantly. "You believe that is what happened?" "I know it." Silence stretched. Wind lifted strands of her hair. His hand rose slowly. Paused near her face. Permission asked without words. She should have stepped away. Didn't. His fingers brushed her cheek. Gentle. Impossible gentleness from a man capable of silencing rooms with a glance. Heat surged through her unexpectedly. Dangerous. Confusing. His gaze dropped briefly to her mouth. Hers followed. Mistake. The distance between them vanished gradually. Breath mingling. Heartbeat roaring louder than reason. If he kissed her. She didn't know whether she would stop him. Footsteps slammed against marble behind them. My king. The voice shattered everything. They separated instantly. Seraphine stood at the doorway. Smile carefully arranged. Eyes burning. Urgent council matter, she said sweetly. Her gaze lingered on Aria's flushed face. Victory flickered there. Halion didn't look away from Aria immediately. Annoyance sharpened his posture. Duty won anyway. He stepped back slowly. Control returning like armor. I will return shortly, he said. She nodded stiffly. Because what else could she do? He leaned closer once more before leaving. Close enough that only she could hear. His breath brushed her ear. Warm. Certain. I waited years to find you again, he whispered. His fingers tightened briefly around hers. Possessive. Unapologetic. And this time, he added softly. You are not leaving my side. The palace did not sleep. It shifted. It watched. And by morning, it whispered. By the time Aria left the royal terrace that night, escorted not by servants but by armed guards who maintained a respectful but unmistakable perimeter, the narrative had already begun mutating inside the marble corridors. She had seen it in the glances. Felt it in the silence when she passed. The king had walked her personally to the main stair. He had not touched her again. He hadn't needed to. Possession had already been implied. And implication, in royal courts, was more dangerous than declaration. By sunrise, the rumors reached the lower quarter. They always did. Markets opened with fresh bread and fresher gossip. Aria felt it immediately when she stepped onto the cobbled street. The air was different. Eyes lingered too long. Conversations cut short as she approached. A boy delivering ink jars nearly dropped his crate when he saw her. You were at the palace, he blurted before his mother yanked him backward. Aria kept walking. Head high. Pulse uneven. Inside the law office, Master Elric did not greet her. He studied her. Long. Carefully. City guard returned you home, he said at last. It wasn't a question. Yes. Silence. He adjusted his spectacles. You understand that visibility invites scrutiny. I didn't seek it. That rarely matters. The warning settled heavily between them. Work felt different that morning. Distracted. Even the ink seemed thinner. Before noon, a client stormed in unannounced. Lord Heron. Of course. He didn't bow this time. Didn't pretend civility. He stood in the center of the office as though reclaiming territory. You enjoy humiliation, he said calmly. Aria did not rise. I survived it. His jaw tightened. You think aligning yourself with him protects you? I'm not aligned with anyone. Don't insult me. His voice lowered. Cold. You don't know what game you've entered. The room seemed to shrink. She met his stare evenly. Then enlighten me. For a fraction of a second? Uncertainty flickered behind his arrogance. He doesn't choose randomly, Heron muttered. Power that old does nothing without purpose. And what purpose would I serve? He stepped closer. Too close. You smell like it, he said under his breath. The words hit strangely. What? He inhaled slightly, then shook his head sharply as if rejecting his own reaction. Stay away from him, he warned. For your own good. Then he left. The door slammed harder than necessary. Aria remained still. Smell? Recognition? The memory of the guards in the carriage resurfaced. The subtle inhalation. The strange look. Something beneath the surface was moving. And she did not understand it. By afternoon, the first article appeared. Distributed discreetly among noble houses before reaching the public press. Former fiancé of Lord Heron seen at private royal dinner. The phrasing was deliberate. Suggestive. Cruel. By evening, exaggerations multiplied. She was escorted from the palace at dawn. She collapsed in the king's chambers. She demanded compensation for past damages. None of it true. All of it effective. Aria sat alone in her room that night, newspaper folded beside her untouched meal. This was how it began. Not with swords. With isolation. If clients withdrew. If landlords raised rent. If social pressure mounted. Survival would become impossible again. And this time, the fall would be harder. A knock came. Not the landlord. Too measured. She hesitated before opening the door. 2 guards stood outside. Royal insignia visible this time. No attempt at subtlety. His Majesty requests your presence, the taller one said. Again? Immediately. The summons felt different tonight. Urgent. She followed anyway. Because refusal had never truly been an option. The palace courtyard was darker than before. Storm clouds gathered overhead. Wind carried the scent of rain. Inside, corridors seemed quieter. Tighter. Servants moved quickly. Avoiding eye contact. When she entered the council chamber, she found him alone. No advisors. No nobles. Only Kalian standing before a long table scattered with reports. He looked up the moment she entered. Relief flashed briefly across his face. Gone instantly. You shouldn't be walking alone, he said. I wasn't. Not here. Anywhere. She frowned. I've survived worse than gossip. His jaw hardened. It isn't gossip. He stepped aside, revealing the papers spread across the table. Surveillance reports. Financial audits. Background investigations. Her name repeated in bold ink across multiple pages. They're digging, he said. Into what? Everything. Her pulse quickened. I've done nothing. That has never protected anyone. Silence fell heavy between them. She stepped closer to the table. Scanning. They were tracing her lineage. Her childhood. Her parents. Records from villages she barely remembered. Why? What are they looking for? She asked quietly. He didn't answer immediately. That frightened her more than any rumor. Proof, he said finally. Of what? That you are not what you appear. Her breath caught. What does that mean? Before he could answer, the doors exploded inward. Not dramatically. Violently. 3 masked figures stormed inside. Steel flashed. The first guard fell before finishing his warning shout. Everything happened at once. Aria stumbled backward instinctively. A blade cut through air inches from her throat. And stopped. Because Kalian caught the attacker's wrist mid-strike. Barehanded. The crack of bone echoed through the chamber. The masked man screamed. Kalian did not flinch. He moved like something older than human instinct. Precise. Efficient. Brutal. He disarmed one attacker with a twist that sent steel skidding across marble. Kicked another into the stone pillar hard enough to splinter it. Blood streaked across the floor. Aria couldn't breathe. This was not controlled court power. This was something feral. The last attacker lunged toward her. She froze. And Kalian intercepted before contact. His hand closed around the man's throat. Lifted him off the ground. Not straining. Not hesitating. You entered my walls, he said quietly. The assassin clawed at his grip. Failed. And aimed for what is mine. The word settled like thunder. Mine. With one sharp motion. The attacker fell limp. Silence returned slowly. Guards rushed in belatedly. Too late. Kalian stood still for several seconds. Breathing steady. Eyes dark. Then he turned toward her. And everything inside him shifted. The violence vanished. Concern replaced it instantly. He crossed the room quickly. Hands hovering near her shoulders. Are you hurt? She shook her head. But her hands trembled. Not from fear of the attackers. From fear of him. You could have died, she whispered. So could you. That's not the same. His gaze sharpened. It is to me. The intensity in his voice stole her breath. You cannot stay in the lower quarter, he continued. It is no longer safe. I won't be confined because of your enemies. My enemies? He repeated. You think this was coincidence? Her mind raced. They came for me? Yes. The word dropped heavy. Why? He stepped closer again. Lowered his voice. Because someone believes you matter. Silence. Thunder rolled outside. Rain began striking the tall windows. Aria swallowed hard. I am not important. You are. How? He studied her face as though debating something internal. Something dangerous. Then. His fingers lifted slightly. Hovering near her collarbone. Not touching. But close. Because of what you are, he said softly. Her heart pounded violently now. And what is that? Before he could answer, a wounded guard staggered forward. My king. Kalian turned. Irritated. The guard held something. A torn piece of fabric. Clutched tightly. It bore a symbol stitched in silver thread. A crest Aria had seen once before. Long ago. On a pendant her mother used to wear. Before it disappeared, the night soldiers came to their village. Her breath left her in a rush. Kalian saw her reaction. Understood immediately. His eyes darkened further. Recognition. Confirmation. You remember, he said quietly. Aria stepped back. The room tilted. That symbol. Yes. Rain thundered harder now. The world narrowing around the two of them. Her pulse roared in her ears. Because suddenly, this wasn't about rumor. Or jealousy. Or scandal. This was about blood. And whatever truth had been buried with it. Kalian's voice lowered to a near whisper. They didn't investigate you by accident. His gaze locked onto hers. They've been searching for you for years. The silence after the old duke spoke did not feel like quiet. It felt like impact. Sound collapsed inward, swallowed by disbelief so complete that even breathing seemed inappropriate. She belongs to the bloodline everyone feared. The words lingered in the air long after his voice failed him. Aria did not move. Could not. Because suddenly every stare in the grand hall changed. Moments ago they had been curious. Suspicious. Envious. Now. They were afraid. Aurelian's royal assembly ball had transformed into something else entirely. A reckoning disguised in silk and candlelight. Music faltered first. One violinist stopped playing. Then another. Until the orchestra dissolved into uneasy silence beneath chandeliers that flickered as though sensing the shift in power. Halien's arm remained around her shoulders. Firm. Unyielding. She felt the tension running through him now, not uncertainty, but readiness. Like a blade waiting to be drawn. What bloodline? She whispered. Her voice sounded smaller than she intended. He didn't answer. That frightened her more than the accusation itself. Across the hall, nobles began murmuring openly. Impossible. They were exterminated. The Northern Purge ended decades ago. Foreign envoys leaned toward one another urgently. Council members abandoned protocol entirely. Only Lady Seraphine stood perfectly still. And smiling. Of course she was. The chaos had been her intention all along. My king, she said gently, stepping forward with calculated grace. Surely the court deserves clarification. Halien's gaze slid toward her. Cold enough to freeze breath. You initiated this spectacle, he said quietly. Her expression softened in mock innocence. I exposed risk. You created it. But she did not retreat. Then deny it, she urged sweetly. If the claim is false. The trap revealed itself instantly. If he defended Aria without explanation, suspicion would deepen. If he confirmed it, panic would follow. Aria's pulse thundered. I don't understand what they're talking about, she said. Her voice carried farther than she expected. Perhaps because fear sharpened honesty. The old duke stepped closer again. Trembling. Eyes fixed on her throat. On the faint outline beneath her dress where the pendant once hung. You have her eyes, he whispered hoarsely. Memory slammed into her. Smoke. Firelight. Her mother kneeling beside a packed trunk. A pendant pressed hurriedly into small hands. Hide this. Never tell anyone your name. She staggered slightly. Halien's grip tightened immediately. Grounding. Possessive. What bloodline? She repeated. This time louder. Demanding. The Duke swallowed hard. The House of Varen. Gasps erupted across the chamber. Some nobles physically stepped backward. Others crossed themselves instinctively. Aria blinked. The name meant nothing. But terror did. What is that? She asked. No one answered. Because suddenly everyone seemed afraid to speak aloud. Seraphine broke the silence. As history records, she said smoothly, House Varen nearly dismantled the throne 2 generations ago. She paced slowly. Voice perfectly controlled. They commanded armies without crowns. Controlled trade without treaties. And possessed unusual influence. Unusual. The word landed heavily. They were accused of treason, she continued. They were executed. A lie. Aria knew it instinctively. Because memories whispered differently. Not execution. Running. Hiding. Soldiers arriving long after midnight. Her breath shortened. That isn't possible, she said. Seraphine turned toward her. Kindness painted onto cruelty. Oh, my dear, it appears survival runs in your family. Laughter didn't follow this time. Only unease. Halien stepped forward. Enough. History written by frightened men rarely survives accuracy, he said. His voice carried authority that silenced the hall again. The Varen were not traitors. Shock rippled outward. He had confirmed it. Political disaster ignited instantly. Council members erupted into argument. Foreign envoys whispered urgently about treaties. Trade lords calculated risk. The king had publicly aligned himself with a bloodline once erased. Aria stared at him. You knew, she breathed. Pain flickered across his face. Yes. The betrayal hit harder than Seraphine's accusation ever could. You investigated me. I protected you. I didn't ask for protection. No, he said quietly. You ran from it. Before she could respond, another voice cut through the chaos. Lord Heron pushed forward. Face pale. Eyes burning. "You cannot be serious," he said sharply. Of course he had come. Predators always arrived when blood-scented opportunity. "She nearly destroyed my house," he continued loudly. "And now you elevate her?" Halion turned slowly. Dangerous calm settling over him. "You misunderstand your relevance to this conversation." Heron ignored the warning. "She falsified contracts," he insisted. "Ruined alliances." Documents were thrust forward again. Seraphine's trap tightening. Aria's chest tightened painfully. History repeating. Again. Always again. "I didn't," she said. No one listened. Voices rose louder. Accusations multiplied. The hall became unbearable noise. Until Halion moved. Fast enough that several nobles flinched. He seized the documents from Heron's hand. Glanced once. Then tore them cleanly in half. Gasps erupted. "You insult my intelligence," he said softly. Every syllable felt lethal. She was framed. Heron paled. "You have no proof." Halion stepped closer. Towering now. "I have judgment." Silence followed. Absolute. He turned back toward the assembly. And toward Aria. She realized suddenly. He had stopped pretending restraint. Something older than diplomacy stood before them now. "I will not allow this court," he said calmly, "to devour another innocent woman because it fears what it cannot control." Seraphine's composure cracked slightly. "My king, alliances are my responsibility." His gaze returned to Aria. Softened. Only slightly. "You asked why you were brought here tonight," he said quietly. Her heart pounded. "Yes." He inhaled slowly. Decision settling into certainty. "Because hiding you any longer invites war." Confusion struck. "What?" He stepped closer. Hands lifting. Gentler this time. The entire court leaned forward instinctively. And then he dropped to one knee. Shock detonated across the hall. Kings did not kneel. Not publicly. Not ever. Aria stared down at him. Unable to breathe. Unable to think. "This kingdom will not hunt you," he said quietly. "Not while I stand." His voice carried through stunned silence. "I claim you before witnesses and treaties alike." Gasps turned into shouting. Seraphine staggered backward. Foreign envoys argued openly now. Political alliances shattered in real time. He rose slowly. Close again. Close enough she felt his breath. "You wanted independence," he murmured softly. "I offer partnership instead." Before she could respond, he kissed her again. Longer. Slower. Not declaration alone this time. Promise. The world dissolved briefly. Shock. Heat. Fear. Relief she didn't understand. When he pulled away, chaos erupted fully. Council members demanded emergency session. Guards moved toward exits. Messengers ran. War rumors already spreading. Political consequences beginning exactly as Seraphine intended. Except she looked terrified now. Because Halion had chosen escalation. And won. Aria barely heard the shouting. Her mind reeled. House Veyron. Her mother. The soldiers. The pendant. "What does it mean?" she whispered. Halion hesitated. Rare uncertainty. Before he could answer, another voice spoke. Soft. Female. From the far balcony above. "I suppose secrets rarely survive spectacle." Everyone turned. A woman stepped into candlelight. Older. Silver-haired. Robes marked with ancient council sigils no longer used. Recognition spread slowly across older nobles. Fear again. She descended the staircase calmly. Eyes never leaving Aria. I warned them, she said lightly. No bloodline disappears entirely. Halian's posture hardened. Lady Morwen. The name landed heavily. The woman smiled faintly. Yes, Your Majesty. She stopped several steps away, studying Aria as though confirming a theory. Then she spoke the words quietly. Clearly. Final. She is not merely Varen. The hall held its breath. Morwen tilted her head slightly. Almost sympathetic. She is the last airborne with the sovereign mark. Whispers trembled. Someone dropped a glass. Aria's voice barely formed. What is that? The older woman's smile faded. Because what she said next sounded less like revelation, and more like warning. The bloodline your ancestors destroyed, she said softly, was feared because kings answered to them. The applause never came. No music followed Lady Morwen's revelation. No courtly laughter softened the moment. Because nothing about what she had said belonged inside celebration. Kings answered to them. The words echoed long after her voice faded, sinking into the marble bones of the grand hall like poison finding cracks. Aria could feel it happening. Power shifting. Not toward her. Away. Nobles stepped back instinctively. Some bowed their heads as though uncertain whether etiquette demanded reverence or avoidance. Others stared openly. Calculating. Fear and opportunity lived side by side in royal courts. She understood that now. Halian's hand remained warm against her waist. Steady. Protective. But suddenly it felt different. Heavy. Like a chain she hadn't noticed forming. You knew, she whispered. The accusation slipped out before she could stop it. He didn't deny it. That hurt more. Yes, he said quietly. The honesty landed like betrayal. The hall blurred around her. You investigated me, she continued, voice trembling despite effort to steady it. You brought me here knowing what I was. I brought you here because hiding you was no longer possible. That isn't an answer. It is the truth. The distinction felt cruel. Around them, council members erupted into urgent debate. Foreign envoys demanded private audiences. Servants ran messages toward waiting courtyards. Political consequences spreading faster than wildfire. But Aria heard none of it. Only memory. Every strange look. Every guard inhaling sharply near her. Every noble watching too closely. Every moment Halian had insisted she remain inside palace walls. Not kindness. Containment. You never intended to let me leave, she said slowly. His silence confirmed everything. Something inside her broke quietly. You don't understand what they would do to you, he said. Her laugh sounded hollow. No, she whispered. I think I finally do. She stepped away from him. Gasps rippled again. No one rejected the king publicly. She barely noticed. You claimed me, she continued softly. You kissed me before an entire kingdom. His jaw tightened. I protected you. You exposed me. Pain flickered across his face. Real pain. It didn't matter. Because humiliation tasted familiar. Manipulation worse. You turned my life into strategy, she said. That is not. You decided who I was before I even knew myself. Her voice cracked then. Emotion finally breaking through control. I trusted you. Silence followed. Heavy. Fragile. Halian stepped forward. Careful. As though approaching something wounded. You still can. No. The word came immediately. Final. because trust required choice. And she realized suddenly she had never truly been given one. I won't be another piece on someone else's board. She turned. Walked away. No guards stopped her. None dared without command. Behind her, she heard Seraphine's soft laughter. Victory disguised as sympathy. Perfect. Rain fell again outside the palace. Hard. Cold. Aria barely remembered leaving. Only movement. Corridors blurring together. Servants scattering from her path. Someone called her name once. She didn't turn. Her chest felt tight. Every revelation crashing together. Royal bloodline. Ancient treaties. Kings answering to ancestors she had never known. Her mother's fear suddenly made sense. Hide your name. Never let them find you. She reached the outer courtyard before realizing something strange. No escort waited. No carriage prepared. Security stretched thin by chaos inside. For the first time since arriving, she was alone. Freedom should have felt like relief. Instead, unease crawled along her spine. The gates stood partially open. Storm wind rattled iron chains. She stepped forward anyway. Because distance felt necessary just to breathe. Thunder rolled overhead. Halfway across the courtyard. Movement flickered near the shadowed archway. She slowed. Hello? No answer. Only rain striking stone. Her instincts whispered danger. Too late. A hand clamped over her mouth. Steel pressed against her ribs. Don't scream. The voice unfamiliar. Cold. Two figures emerged from darkness. Masked. Efficient. She struggled instinctively. Elbow striking backward. The attacker cursed. Strong arms restrained her easily. We need her alive, another voice muttered. Alive. Panic surged violently. They're already searching, someone else whispered urgently. Move. They dragged her toward a waiting carriage hidden beyond the gate. She kicked. Bit down hard enough to taste blood. One attacker struck her temple lightly. Stars burst behind her eyes. Sound faded. Rain swallowed the courtyard. Inside the palace, Halion felt it before hearing it. An absence. He stood alone in the council chamber while arguments raged around him. Foreign ministers demanded clarification. Military advisors warned rebellion. Seraphine attempted diplomacy she had never intended to honor. None of it mattered. Because suddenly, he could not feel her. The realization struck like physical pain. He turned sharply. Where is she? No one answered immediately. Wrong answer. Guards rushed toward corridors seconds later. Chaos multiplied. He moved faster than protocol allowed. Servants flattened themselves against walls as he passed. Her chambers empty. Balcony open. Rain-soaking silk curtains. Cold air rushing inward. Something inside him snapped quietly. Search the grounds, he ordered. Voice dangerously calm. Seal every gate. A captain hesitated. My king, council protocol. The look Halion gave him ended discussion instantly. Steel entered his tone. Now. Boots thundered away. Minutes stretched into torture. Until a young guard stumbled forward. Pale. Breathless. There was disturbance in the outer courtyard. Halion did not remember crossing the distance. Only arriving. Rain-drenched stone. Torches flickered wildly. And there? A torn piece of silver fabric caught against iron fencing. From her dress. His hand closed around it slowly. Breathing stopped entirely. Tracks visible briefly in mud before storm erased them. Carriage wheels. Gone. Behind him, advisors arrived cautiously. This could provoke war, one began. Halion didn't look back. Because something colder than anger settled inside him. Something older. They wanted her, he said quietly. Realization spreading. Investigation. Assassins. Public exposure. Everything connected. She was safer hidden, another advisor muttered. The words barely finished before Halion turned. Danger filled the space instantly. She was never safe, he said softly. Lightning split the sky overhead. Rain intensified. For a moment he simply stood there, holding torn silk. Then, his control shattered. He slammed his fist into the courtyard pillar hard enough to crack marble. Guards flinched. No one spoke. Because kings did not lose composure. Men did. She thinks I manipulated her, he said quietly. No one dared answer. She believes I turned her into a weapon. His voice faltered. Barely. She doesn't know. The confession slipped out before pride could stop it. I searched half the world after the purge. Silence deepened. Rain masked everything. I thought she died with the others. Pain sharpened every word now. Raw. Unprotected. I waited years to find proof she survived. He looked down at the torn silk. Voice lowering further. And when I finally did. His throat tightened visibly. I swore no one would ever touch her again. Lightning flashed again. Thunder followed instantly. The word sounded terrifyingly certain. They will not hide. He turned toward the palace. Toward war already forming. Because whoever took her, he said quietly, just declared themselves my enemy. Miles away. The carriage raced through storm-dark roads. Aria's consciousness drifted between waking and oblivion. Voices murmured nearby. She reacted when she saw the crest. Of course she did. She carries it. Her head throbbed. Vision blurred. Chains rattled softly near her wrists. Cold realization settled slowly. Not rescue. Not accident. Planned. Her last clear thought before darkness claimed her again was the memory of Halion kneeling before her. And the terrible possibility that she might never see him again. Storm clouds gathered over Aurelian long before the army moved. Not ordinary storm clouds. War clouds. Messengers rode through the night carrying sealed orders marked only with the king's signet. Barracks doors slammed open across the capital. Armories unlocked weapons untouched since border rebellions decades earlier. By sunrise, the city understood something terrible had happened. The gates closed. Trade halted. And soldiers marched toward roads that did not officially exist. Halion stood at the center of the war chamber while generals argued around him. Maps covered the stone table, forests, abandoned mines, forgotten estates erased from public record generations ago. Every path circled the same destination. The northern ravines. Rainwater dripped steadily from his coat. He had not changed clothes since the courtyard. Had not slept. The torn piece of Aria's silver dress remained clenched in his fist. Evidence. Promise. Failure. They crossed the eastern bridge before dawn, a scout reported nervously. They knew patrol rotations. Inside information, another general muttered. Traitors existed everywhere. Halion's gaze never lifted from the map. Close every port, he said quietly. My king, an advisor hesitated, trade collapse will provoke unrest. So will my restraint. Silence followed. Because everyone in that room understood something fundamental. The king was no longer negotiating. He was hunting. They want leverage, the council strategist added carefully. A live hostage increases bargaining power. Halion finally looked up. Dark eyes hollowed by fury. They miscalculated. How? His voice lowered. Because anger had passed already. Only certainty remained. They assumed she matters to me politically. A pause. Lightning flashed through high windows. They do not understand, he finished softly. That she matters to me personally. No one spoke again. Orders followed rapidly. Elite riders dispatched. Border towers alerted. And when the final scout hesitated near the door. My king. Halion turned. We found survivors. Hope felt dangerous. Where? The scout swallowed. An abandoned quarry near the ravines. Smoke trails. Movement after midnight. Trap. Obviously. Halion smiled anyway. Cold. Perfect. Prepare the horses. The quarry smelled like wet iron and old death. Rainwater pooled between jagged rocks as Halion dismounted before the others. Torches flickered faintly below ground level. Hidden entrance. Amateurs believed secrecy required darkness. Professionals understood King's learned patience. He signaled silence. Guards surrounded the perimeter. Steel drawn. Wind howled through broken stone. Then. He walked inside alone. Because sometimes ruthlessness required witnesses. Aria woke to pain. Not sharp. Heavy. Her wrists burned where iron restraints held her against a wooden chair. Dim lanterns revealed stone walls dripping moisture. Underground. Voices argued nearby. Told you she wouldn't remember. She recognized the crest. She's weaker than expected. Her vision cleared slowly. 3 figures stood across the chamber. Masks removed now. Faces unfamiliar. Except one. Lord Heron. Of course. He leaned casually against a table stacked with documents. Her stomach dropped. You, she whispered. His smile widened. I wondered how long before you opened those eyes. The trail tasted bitter. You tried to warn me, she realized slowly. Stay away from him. Yes. He sighed dramatically. I truly hoped you would listen. You kidnapped me. I saved you. She laughed weakly despite herself. That's a strange interpretation. Another figure stepped forward. Older. Scarred. Eyes sharp with fanatic devotion. You misunderstand, the man said calmly. We preserved the kingdom. Aria frowned. What? Heron poured wine slowly. As always, he murmured, history becomes clearer once truth replaces myth. He approached her carefully. You see, the Varen bloodline never threatened the throne through armies. He crouched slightly. Voice lowering. They threatened it because kings obeyed them. Cold realization crept inward. The sovereign mark, she whispered. Recognition flashed across his face. Ah, he said softly. So memory awakens. Fear settled deeper now. You targeted me. Since birth, the older man admitted. No hesitation. You were meant to die during the purge. Her lungs refused air. What? The soldiers burned every estate, he continued calmly. But one child vanished. His gaze sharpened. You. Aria's hands trembled. My mother. She betrayed her own house to hide you. Pain surged unexpectedly. She died because of you, Heron added quietly. Something inside Aria shattered. Rage. Grief. Truth colliding violently. You destroyed everything, she whispered. No, Heron corrected gently. We prevented a tyrant. Footsteps echoed suddenly from above. Heavy. Measured. The kidnappers froze. Steel slid from scabbards. Doors exploded inward seconds later. Wood shattered. Smoke flooded the chamber. Guards stormed through. And behind them. Halion. He didn't look like a king. He looked like judgment. Blood streaked his sleeve. Rain soaked dark hair across his forehead. His gaze found her instantly. Everything else disappeared. Relief hit so hard she nearly sobbed. "Are you hurt?" he asked. The same question. Always first. She shook her head weakly. Chains rattled. Heron laughed softly. "I wondered how long before you arrived." Halion didn't respond. He advanced slowly. Predator closing distance. "Release her," he said. Simple. Final. The older conspirator stepped forward. "You kneel before blood you should fear." Halion's eyes darkened further. "I kneel only by choice." Steel flashed. Combat erupted instantly. Guards clashed violently in confined space. Lanterns shattered. Shadows jumped across walls. Halion reached Aria within seconds. Blade slicing chains cleanly. His hands steadied her. Gentle despite chaos. "You left angry," he murmured quietly. "I came anyway." Emotion surged unexpectedly. "You manipulated me," she whispered. Pain crossed his face. "Yes." Honesty again. "Because losing you once nearly destroyed me." Her breath caught. "What?" He hesitated. Battle raging around them. "I searched every grave after the purge," he said quietly. "I thought you were dead." Truth landed harder than confession. "You knew me?" "As a child." Memories flickered. A boy standing beside soldiers. Dark eyes watching her hide behind her mother's skirts. "Impossible." "You protected us," she breathed. "Yes." A blade swung toward them suddenly. Halion turned. Too slow. Steel cut across his side. Blood spilled instantly. He didn't fall. Didn't even react. But she felt it. Shock. Fear. No. Rage exploded inside her unexpectedly. Something older than thought awakened. Heat surged beneath her skin. The older conspirator froze. Eyes widening. "She's awakening," he whispered. Lantern flames bent toward her. Air trembled. Aria staggered forward instinctively. "What's happening?" Halion grabbed her shoulders. "Look at me." Grounding. Steady. "You choose your power," he said. Not command. Trust. Around them, enemies hesitated. Fear spreading. "You targeted her since birth," Halion said coldly to Heron. "Yes," Heron admitted calmly. "Because kingdoms fall when sovereign blood awakens." Truth spoken openly. Finally. Aria's voice trembled. "You killed my family. To save everyone else." Silence followed. Then. She stepped beside Halion willingly. Not trapped. Not claimed. Chosen. "I'm done running," she said quietly. His breath caught. Hope flickered. Guards subdued remaining attackers quickly. Victory within reach. Until. A hidden crossbow fired from above. No warning. No time. The bolt struck Halion squarely through the shoulder. He staggered violently. Blood sprayed across stone. Aria screamed. The assassin prepared another shot. And vanished beneath collapsing rubble as guards tackled him. Halion dropped to one knee. Breathing uneven now. Color draining rapidly. "No," she whispered. Hands shaking as she caught him. He smiled faintly despite pain. "You always did hate dramatic endings." Her vision blurred. Because suddenly. Victory didn't matter. Power didn't matter. Nothing mattered except the terrifying possibility that she might lose him before ever choosing him properly. The bells did not ring loudly. They never did in this part of the capital. Instead, they breathed. Low. Resonant. Ancient. A sound that moved through stone corridors and climbed ivory towers like a memory returning home. And for the first time since war had brushed its cold fingers across the kingdom, the sound did not carry fear with it. It carried relief. Peace does not arrive like thunder. It settles slowly, like dust after a storm. 3 weeks had passed since the fortress burned. 3 weeks since betrayal shattered masks and revealed enemies hidden behind silk smiles. 3 weeks since she nearly died in his arms. The court called it victory. The people called it salvation. But inside the palace walls, healing was quieter than celebration. Morning sunlight spilled through tall arched windows, painting long gold patterns across polished marble floors. Servants moved carefully. Guards stood straighter. No one spoke loudly anymore. Because the Alpha King had changed. And everyone could feel it. He no longer ruled like a blade drawn at the throat of the world. Now he watched. Listened. Waited. As if protecting something fragile. Someone fragile. She stood before the mirror alone. No attendants. No advisors. Just her reflection. The silk gown resting against her skin was simple compared to royal standards. Ivory instead of crimson. Soft embroidery instead of jewels heavy enough to bruise. She lifted her hand slowly. Her fingers brushed the faint scar near her collarbone, the one left by the blade meant to end her life. A reminder. Of who she had been. And who she had survived becoming. Her voice came quietly. I almost ran again. The confession lingered in the empty chamber. Because fear had not vanished with victory. Independence had always been her armor. Trust still felt like stepping onto thin ice. Behind her. The door opened. No knock. He never knocked. Heavy footsteps paused just inside. He did not approach immediately. As if giving her the choice to send him away. You would have been terrible at hiding, he said softly. A faint smile touched her lips despite herself. You underestimate my survival skills. I watched you steal a horse during a riot, he replied. I underestimate nothing about you. She turned then. And the world shifted slightly the way it always did when their eyes met. The Alpha King wore no crown. No ceremonial armor. Only dark formal attire, simple, almost human. But the power around him remained undeniable. Danger softened by devotion. His gaze lingered on her scar. Pain flickered across his expression. He still blamed himself. She crossed the room slowly. Each step deliberate. Measured. Not because she feared him. Because this mattered. Outside, distant voices gathered beyond palace gates. Citizens waiting. Nobles whispering. An entire kingdom watching what came next. Political peace required symbols. And today. They would become one. You can still stop this, he murmured. The words surprised her. His hands remained at his sides. Not reaching. Not claiming. Weeks ago, he would have decided for both of them. Now. He waited. She studied him carefully. The man who had terrified courts. Destroyed enemies. Burned armies to ash searching for her when she disappeared. The man who had confessed, voice-breaking, that losing her would have ended him. Safety had once meant distance from power. Now safety stood in front of her wearing restraint like armor. You think I'm afraid of crowns? She asked quietly. I think, he said, voice roughening, you deserve freedom more than obligation. Silence stretched between them. Then she stepped closer. Close enough to feel warmth. Close enough to see exhaustion hidden beneath strength. I spent my whole life fighting not to belong to anyone, she whispered. Her fingers lifted. Rested against his chest. Right above his heart. It thundered beneath her palm. And you spent yours believing love was weakness. A breath passed. Shared. Fragile. Dangerous. But somewhere between survival and war, she continued softly, we both learned something. He swallowed. What? She smiled. Not sharp. Not defensive. Soft. Certain. That choosing someone is not the same as being owned. His control nearly shattered then. She saw it. The restraint. The hope barely contained. Outside. The bells deepened. The ceremony waited. History waited. She took his hand first. Gasps echoed faintly from guards witnessing the moment. Because kings claimed. Kings were not chosen. Yet she laced her fingers through his deliberately. I am not standing beside you because destiny forced me, she said. Her voice steadied. Stronger now. I am not here because of bloodlines or fear or prophecy. His breath hitched. She guided him toward the open doors where sunlight flooded the hall. Crowds roared beyond distant balconies. Peace treaties signed. Enemy banners lowered. A kingdom reborn. He stopped just before crossing the threshold. One last hesitation. One last chance for her to walk away. She turned back toward him. The same place where their story had truly begun months ago. A memory echoed between them. Her voice then, sharp with defiance. I will never belong to you. She remembered the anger. The fear. The walls she built to survive. Now. She rose onto her toes. Pressed her forehead gently against his. And the world quieted. I don't belong to you, she whispered. His eyes darkened with pain. Until she finished. I choose you. The words shattered whatever distance remained. His hand rose at last, cradling her face as if she were both miracle and battlefield victory. Outside. The doors opened. Light exploded into the hall. Cheers thundered like waves crashing against cliffs. Not conquest. Not dominance. Unity. They stepped forward together. King and equal. Power and choice intertwined. And somewhere far beyond celebration, in shadows not yet fully extinguished, someone watched. Because peace was never the end of a story. Only the moment before the next one begins.